It is a busy day in Washington as the Senate gets set to open debate on immigration, while the White House issues its spending blueprint for next year. The president's 2019 budget was delivered to the House Budget Committee today. It is a $4 trillion proposal. It calls for increases in military spending and sets aside money for the border wall. It also includes major cuts to social programs like Medicare and Medicaid. In all, it would add $1 trillion to the deficit. The president also pledged to fix America's infrastructure by calling for $200 billion in federal spending.
We're going to make our infrastructure modernized, and we're really way behind schedule. We're way behind other countries. We always led the way for many, many years. Then a number of decades ago, it slowed down, and over the last 8 years and 15 years, to be honest, it's come to a halt. This morning, I submitted legislative principles to Congress that will spur the biggest and boldest infrastructure investment in American history. The framework will generate an unprecedented $1.5 to $1.7 trillion investment in American infrastructure. We're going to have a lot of public-private, and that way it gets done on time, on budget.
Erin Delmore is a senior political correspondent for Bustle.com and joins us now. Erin, thanks for being with us. So now Republicans have this spending plan, $4 trillion. Senator Rand Paul called it wasteful. So how is the party of fiscal responsibility stomaching this?
That's the dilemma that they're facing. You have Republicans, not only Rand Paul, but in the House, the Freedom Caucus, who are fiscal conservatives, and they can't stand to see this kind of money being padded onto the government spending bill. You also have Democrats who are looking at some of these priorities and saying, we don't want to cut Medicare and Medicaid. So there are poison pills embedded in here for everybody. But we've got to point out at the same time, Congress has already voted to lift those spending caps. They've already set a rough blueprint of what they want to see, not only over the next year, but over the next 2 years. That matters.
No, it's interesting, though, to point out that while this is a huge spending bill and it seems like anything goes, there are cuts to social programs, which Democrats are very interested in talking about. And I'm assuming voters who are thinking about their midterm vote are also interested in figuring out what are those cuts.
Yeah, well, you're going to see, if the White House gets its plan through, significant cuts to Medicare and Medicaid. Now, remember, Republicans have wanted to make this push toward cutting entitlement programs, but it's been a big question of how Congress is going to handle it. Paul Ryan has said it's not something he's interested in seeing, and you're going to find lawmakers having a tough time taking these decisive, tough, difficult votes during a midterm election year. When we start talking about cuts to entitlement programs, when we start talking about any payments that'll go up or down for voters, that's going to be big when it comes to the 2018 midterms.
Absolutely. Now, one part of the country that looks like it's going to benefit from this spending bill is infrastructure. And we know there's aging infrastructure in this country. There's a lot that needs to be done. The president is putting aside $200 billion out of the 1.5. Out of the 1.5. So how much of that, though, is expected to come from the private sector, from state and local governments, which, by the way, state governments don't have a lot in their coffers?
Yeah. Let's take it by the numbers here. Trump is calling for a $1.5 trillion infrastructure plan. That's more money than the $1 trillion he promised on the campaign trail. He's saying the federal government is going to kick in $200 billion. Specifically, half that, $100 billion, is going to be used to incentivize state and local spending and to try to incentivize the private sector to get into the game. You can see when he talks about this, his eyes light up. He's Trump the builder. This goes back to his previous career. It's something he's intensely interested in. But a lot of people are questioning the math. Can you really spur up to $6.50 for every dollar the federal government puts in? Does that math work out? Democrats and a lot of Republicans are saying they needed to see a dedicated revenue stream from the federal government to go toward rebuilding these projects. They're not seeing that in this proposal. And while Republicans are balking at the overall price tag, Democrats are saying $200 billion in startup isn't enough.
It isn't enough to go anywhere. And we hear also that the president is interested in perhaps getting public funds to take over some of the country's major airports.
Yeah.
Is that a possibility?
This is something he's always been interested in. We see him opening up privatization for NASA. We could see a lot of different effects here. These are all proposals in the first round. They're going to be hashed out.
Right, we'll see. All right. So let's turn to immigration. We know that that's being debated right now on the Senate floor in a rather old-fashioned way. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has opened it up to debate, right?
Yeah.
How likely is whatever comes out of the Senate floor and its vote, how likely is that to pass in the House as well?
So if you take it one by one, he's opening up the floor for votes and for debate. Like we mentioned earlier, this is going to put a lot of senators on the spot. People are going to take account of what they vote for and what they don't, and that could be used against them in the midterms. But think about the different camps here. You have the White House plan that wants to create a path for citizenship, not only for the 800,000 Dreamers in the country, but to nearly 1.8, I mean almost double that number, who could qualify for status. But that's coupled with a very conservative proposal to cut back legal immigration. You could look at Senators Perdue and Cotton. They're the closest ones to mimicking this White House approach on the floor. You could look at Graham and Durbin, who are offering something that's more of a bipartisan compromise. There are going to be a lot of different ideas put on the floor.
Absolutely. And the president addressed immigration today. Let's take a listen to what he said.
I did not want DACA in the budget. I wanted DACA separate so that we could talk about it and make a deal. And I hope to be able to make a deal. I hope the Democrats are not going to use it just as a campaign. You know, they've been talking about DACA for many years, and they haven't produced. We started talking about DACA, and I think we'll produce. But if the Democrats want to make a deal, it's really up to them.
All right, so he's putting the ball in the Democrats' court. How likely is that to happen?
Well, he said before that he did want to see immigration addressed earlier. Now he's saying he did not. I see two things in that statement. The first is that we've yet to see from him exactly how he feels. I mean, he's called DACA a bill of love. He wants to see something that's inclusive for what he calls these incredible kids. He's also made the comments about Mexicans coming across the border, bringing their worst, rapists and criminals. Neither of those comments have led lawmakers to figure out what exactly he wants to see. At the same time, Republicans are eager to say that the Democrats are the ones to blame for the shutdown. That's why you see him needling there.
Yes, absolutely. But there's a mixed message for sure that no one can figure out. All right, let's transition now to the Rob Porter fallout. It seems that, publicly President Trump gave Rob Porter the benefit of the doubt. But we hear reports that privately he may believe that the accusations are true. What do we think is really going on here?
So it's tough to say, partly because the White House communications arm and the staff haven't got their messages straight. They're not being consistent when they talk about who knew what, when. Now, if the president is privately saying that he's aghast and abhorred by these allegations against Porter, it could go a long way to say that publicly, because what he hasn't said so far is that he gives any credence to the victim statements, which again are consistent by multiple women with photographic evidence. And there's certainly a trend now where you see the president defending his loyalists, but not giving the same amount of credence or attention or weight to the claims by the accusers.
Absolutely. Now, how is all of this affecting Chief of Staff John Kelly? Because we know for now the Republicans say they're standing by their man. The White House is standing by him. But how quickly could that change?
Let's take a little bit of the record on Kelly so far. It's not just this moment with what he knew about Rob Porter. It's also the comment he made the other week when he said that some people who could have qualified for DACA were too lazy to get up off their asses. That's exactly his quote. He also picked a fight last year with Congresswoman Frederica Wilson. He's also been one to say that the president has evolved on his position on immigration. He's evolved on border security, implying that the president didn't know exactly what he was doing when he was on the campaign trail. All of these things are tough to stomach for the Trump administration. They're all dings on Kelly's record and his credibility.
So there are various reasons that President Trump could be losing patience.
Various reasons, but at the same time, Kelly is still given credit for bringing order to this White House. He's control the flow of information, who has access to the president, what information they put in front of him. That's how Kelly has said he largely views his role. And a lot of people still say that he's done it well. And while there are at least a few names that could be floated as replacements, Kevin McCarthy, Mick Mulvaney, Tom Barrack, it's hard to say who that front runner would be.
Absolutely. Erin Delmore, thank you so much for your insight.
Thanks.